To start then, sounds very good. Thank you very much, Matt. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Philip Schonrock, and I'm very happy to be here with you from Bogota, Colombia, in this annual event that IISD and Cepei are hosting. And it is a briefing, a question and answers that we are doing every year towards the high-level political forum, and this year is no different. I'm very happy that we can today actually discuss what to expect from this 2024 HLPF, what is the approach that we are seeing, and how is it connecting to the Summit of the Future. For today's background and for the HLPF 2024, we are seeing that the main theme of this year is reinforcing the 2030 agenda and eradicating poverty in times of multiple crises. The effective delivery of sustainability, resilience, and innovative solutions. We also have thematic areas under review this year, and we will have colleagues from 38 states expressing that have expressed their interest to carry out the VNR and presenting it in July at the HLPF. As every year, we are starting with a poll that I will show you in a second that we would like to join us. Before I will present you today's program with our stellar guests that we have today coming from around the globe in addressing you today in order to see what will be happening at the HLPF in New York in a couple of weeks' time. So over to you, colleagues. My colleague Matt will show you the questions so that we can start, and then I will open up the floor for our panelists. Very well. The first question, and you will see that you have the ability to open up the Mentimeter at your right-hand side. Please tell us from what region you are coming from so that we know who we are speaking to and also the panelists, and simply give your answer here into the chat, please. Well, even though that this is still in the making, we are seeing that our colleagues are coming mainly from North America, from Europe at this very moment. It is very early in Latin America and late in Asia. So let's see if we can see that colleagues are connecting, and like we're saying, from around the world at this very moment, and seeing the numbers going high from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Happy to see this. And Matt, simply interpreting this, we are having a lot of interest from Europe and North America. And now in the last couple of seconds and minutes, we are seeing that our colleagues from the Global South are joining us as well. So I would like to go to the next question, please. Which are you planning to follow the HLPF? The three answers is that you will be attending in person, you will tune in online, or you will not be there, but you will read the summary report. And for those colleagues just joining us, you have the possibility to give your opinion through the Mentimeter, which is on your right-hand side in the Zoom meeting. Well, colleagues, it looks like we will see a lot of you in person, but still the online world, it's still very much in the making, because it's the one that you will be looking at the most, being connected online. And some of us hopefully will reconnect in New York again, and then share the report for those that did not have the opportunity to be there. So we are seeing still it is a hybrid world, and we will be having a lot of people joining us online, but also we will reconnect now again in person in New York. Please, Matt, the next question. Which goal is not reviewed this year? This is a fun question for those that actually have been reading it, and it looks like many of you are already giving correct answers. And Matt, it looks like everybody is very much on board in knowing that we will not be reviewing life on land during this year's HLPF. And several of them, as we're reading in the chat, have reviewed all of them and will present them in their VNRs. So Matt, it is clear that we will not be reviewing SDG 15, and let's go to our last question. How many reviews, how many VNRs have been submitted in total? We will see what the answer is for you at this very moment. And most of you look like you are on the right track. As last as we could count, it was 367 reviews from almost every country of the planet. And last but not least, Matt, our last question. This is up to you. Which is the theme you will be observing at this year's HLPF? What is your main interest that you have so that we could share it here with the colleagues? Please simply let us know, and then we will start the panel. Well, very much on the top of mind, it's climate and use, health and education. We are seeing there a lot of momentum, and of course, poverty and peace. And Matt, when we are ready, we will, of course, share all of this information with you. But it looks like the tendency, it's very much on climate change use and education. And last but not least, agriculture, that I'm seeing that it's getting a lot of momentum here. That being said, if you can give me back the screen, Matt, at this moment, because we will start now in introducing our panel of today. I'm very happy that we have a stellar panel with us this very morning or afternoon to join us and to give us a sense of what will be happening. No one better than the president of ECOSOC, the ambassador Paula Narváez from Chile, who will address us and give us an overview about what she has been working with her team during the last year and what success will look like at the end of July for her. Then we have Rudy Soltau, the chief of Intergovernmental Policy and Review Branch of UNDESA, as well as the Vice Minister of National Planning and Economic Policy of Costa Rica, Mr. Marlon Navarro, and our colleague Florence Seyewu from the SDG Kenya Forum, and also the co-chair of the Coalition of the UN We Want. And last but certainly not least, my colleague from IISD will be addressing us, Lynn Wagner, the Senior Director of Tracking Progress of IISD. As I said, I will be moderating today. My name is Philip Schonroth, and it is a good morning to everyone. And we will start now with Paula Narváez in addressing us and letting us know about her priorities, the ones set by the president of ECOSOC, and what can we expect from this year. Where are your priorities? Good morning once again, Ambassador, to you, and we are very happy to have you among us. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Philip. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Cepei also for organizing this meeting and this opportunity to share the challenges that we face in this next HLPF this month. I have organized my notes in some in few words. So let me express first that it is my honor to address you today as President of the Economic and Social Council as we prepare for the 2024 HLPF on Sustainable Development, which is starting, as you know, next week. The HLPF serves as a testament to our joint commitment to the 2030 Agenda, specifically as we navigate an era defined by unparalleled global challenges, geopolitical tensions, a fragile global financial system, and an escalating climate emergency, among others, pose obstacles in our path toward achieving the SDGs. Yet it is precisely in these moments of adversity that the transformative power of the SDGs can really come through. The 2030 Agenda, with its 17 interconnected goals, serve as our compass, guiding us towards a future that is equitable, prosperous, and sustainable for all. The HLPF is an indispensable platform for us to collectively assess our progress, identify critical gaps, and invigorate our efforts to turn this visionary blueprint into tangible reality. Dear colleagues, dear participants, the theme for this year's HLPF, as Philippe mentioned, is reinforcing the 2030 Agenda and eradicating poverty in times of multiple crises, the effective delivery of sustainable, resilient, and innovative solutions. It is a long theme, but a pertinent one, which conveys the urgency of our mission. Member States are currently engaged in negotiations aimed at formulating a concise and action-oriented ministerial declaration that assesses the progress made on the SDGs under review. The declaration seeks to provide a comprehensive overview of achievements and challenges encountered in pursuing the SDGs. Member States are collaboratively developing a series of actionable measures with clearly defined outcomes, also building on the outcomes of the 2023 SDG Summit. I hope the declaration will provide a robust vision towards supporting effective national strategies and fostering international cooperation toward achieving the SDGs worldwide. It should also raise our ambitions to navigate the challenging crisis upon us, while elevating and preserving the hard-won gains that countries have made on several fronts. As we look ahead to next week at the HLPF, discussions will delve into in-depth reviews of 5 pivotal goals: SDG 1 on poverty, on non-poverty, SDG 2 on zero hunger, SDG 13 on climate action, SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions, and SDG 17 on partnerships for the goals. These goals are not isolated objectives. Rather, they are intricately interconnected and mutually reinforcing. This particular set of goals is highly relevant to the current state of the world. Progress on one goal inevitably contributes to progress on others. Another highlight of the HLPF will be the voluntary national reviews, or VNRs. The VNRs will offer invaluable insights into the diverse challenges faced by nations worldwide. They will also showcase the innovative solutions that will be implemented to address these challenges. These reviews are more than reports. They demonstrate that for each country, even in the face of adversity, progress is attainable when we join forces and work collaboratively. We have a very special group of 37 VNRs countries this year, representing all regions of the world. Presentations are designed to ensure that the countries presenting the VNRs can benefit from engaged debate and feedback. I really look forward to following these discussions and learning about how countries are implementing innovations and partnerships and engaging all stakeholders in national policies and planning. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the challenges we face, we must continue to collaborate on our joint effort for a better world. I thank you all for your continued energy and commitment to engaging in the HLPF and its activities throughout the year. Your participation and your voice are what makes the HLPF a distinctive and participatory space for dialogue and action. As we look toward the summit of the future, we must remind ourselves that the SDGs are about more than targets and indicators. The 2030 Agenda is about improving the lives of people in our countries and communities, and a commitment to do better for current and future generations. I look forward to meeting you all here in New York and together strengthen our commitment to action. Thank you, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your remarks and giving us the possibility to know where you are concentrating your presidency and your efforts for this year's HLPF. And Ambassador, before we let you go, we have over 400 experts from around the world, from Asia Pacific, Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, and Europe and North America connected. And if I may ask you, for your personal take, what it's where we should take the most of the attention towards the summit of the future? Where do you see that we as civil society, think tanks, and others could actually trigger this process forward? Is there anything or any theme that you will put focused on the attention of this year's forum for this crowd that is in front of you very much today? So if you're still with us and could address the floor once again, Ambassador, where should we put our attention on? As I mentioned, you have over 400 stakeholders from around the world interested in the HLPF. Many of them have worked on the VNRs, but we are in times of uncertainty and, of course, looking for guidance. So let us know where your attention will be laid on in the next couple of weeks that you will be sharing today. So over to you.
Thank you so much. I will mix Spanish and English here, maybe, no? But I want to say first that the main challenge we have, I mean, one of the main challenge that we have is the connection of dots among the different UN processes. So I think that our attention should be focused on the capacity that we need to do from civil society perspective, but also from member states perspective on how we can connect the SDG summit, for instance, of course, and the outcomes of the SDG summit with this HLPF and with the summit of the future. We need to have not just common narrative, but also common actions. And the follow-up of those actions from civil society perspective is quite important, because it's the capacity from civil society to do the accountability that we need to also express in this process, because the trust of the multilateral system also relies in the capacity of member states to implement the commitments that we are addressing here in the different conference, summits, and forums. So for civil society, I think it's quite fundamental that with what they hear here in New York, then they can see something in the field. I mean, that connection, I think, is fundamental. And the role of some institutions that are in between, I mean, the regional commissions, for instance, they can play an important role as well in this follow-up for the implementation. So I think that the engagement on different levels and different layers at the same time it's quite important. Of course, according to my priorities, I can say that my focus in the substantive part of this discussion is related to how we address the situation of women and girls, specifically countries and in specific conditions, as you know, SEEDs, LLDCs, LDCs. I think that we need to focus on that situation as well, and certain groups that are marginalized groups most of the time. I mean, I'm talking about persons with disability, I'm talking about older persons, of course, indigenous persons as well, and youth. I think that how countries in their national reviews are addressing the inclusion of these groups in the process of making decisions is quite fundamental. We need here to rebuild trust in the multilateral system, and we have an opportunity with this conference to have the global community discussing, but also trying to express not just the new commitment, but also concrete actions in the implementation of the 2030 agenda. Now I will shift into Spanish y quiero decir aquí en español.
And I would like to say in Spanish for all the constituency that also speaks my language and for everyone as well. I would like to say that our main commitment during the presidency of ECOSOC has been to be and to offer a platform that in some way is unique, that would include all those different instances and efforts that the UN system makes to be able to implement the development agenda. All this throughout the functional commissions of ECOSOC, through the different segments of ECOSOC that makes common the work of all these agencies from the UN, the governments, as well as civil society, to be able to really generate that community that we need, to be able to debate the different needs that we have in pro, of course, of the different groups and the different realities that exist. We have offered that platform, that unique platform, and that has been our main, I would say, contribution to always make clear that we need an open window towards civil society that is broader each time, and a capacity of the states to be accountable to that civil society. And of course, the system of the UN has to be agile and operational that delivers the recommendation to the member states to be able to move forward in the development agenda. Finally, I would like to say that if we do not go into these development agenda, there is no way to prevent conflict. We have made emphasis on the fact that if we reinforce that agenda, that development agenda, we are at the same time preventing conflict. If we don't do this, then we have to necessarily go into much more complex situations once the conflicts are triggered that have multiple roots, but of course, many of the problems in terms of development or humanitarian situations such as what we are witnessing today. So the invitation is that the pillar for the development of the UN that integrates human rights, humanitarian topics, and of course, the peace agenda are incorporated this and that this can be strengthened. And this is all from my side. And once again, Philippe, thank you to Cepei and to all who have made this event possible and for having brought me here today. Well received this invitation, Ambassador. Thank you.
For letting you know, we have the translation from Spanish to English, English to Spanish. It was said in the chat. I won't translate everything now what the ambassador has just said. I believe the message was very clear to those colleagues in Latin America, and simply to let you know, whoever will address you in Spanish, you will hear him in English by the chat. Ambassador, it was our pleasure to having you here today. I will now take the floor and address our other colleagues that will join us at this very moment. So a very good day for you, and thank you for your time. And now, starting very clearly about where we should focus our attention, I will take this conversation back to New York, where it was, to Friedrich Soltau, who is from UNDESA and who throughout the year actually has to organize the HLPF in their day-to-day business. So we are very happy to have you here, Friedrich. And right to you, what are the most important issues to focus on this year's HLPF? Good morning once again to you.
Good morning, Philip, and good day, colleagues. It's wonderful to join you. I hope you can hear me clearly. I think the ambassador who gave a wonderful introduction to some of the highlights for the HLPF, and she really spoke to what we're looking for and the key role of the HLPF. So I want to make 3 points, but first to say why the HLPF. It's an annual meeting, but I think as Ambassador Narvaez really put it first and in the forefront, the HLPF is really the place where the SDGs come together, are reviewed, are discussed, are debated, and not just governments, but the stakeholders she mentioned, the real drilling down into the national highlights that the VNRs offer us, and hopefully we'll say a few more things about that. But why and what's important this year? One, the SDGs, as we know, are in peril. So whatever avenue, whichever platform we have to look at progress, to look at obstacles, we need to make it the best use of that. So that is the HLPF. This is the place that's internationally set up the platform for the review, for the follow-up. So that's one. Two is we need the follow-up to the SDG Summit, as Ambassador Narvaez also mentioned. We need to connect those dots, and the HLPF is the place to bring a broad constituency together, look at the follow-up to the SDG Summit. The SDG Summit really had some breakthrough moments, one of those being on finance. I think if we look back at the SDG Summit, one of those areas that got new momentum was on finance, on the means of implementation. The HLPF won't make breakthroughs, but it needs to continue that momentum to see how we take those new ideas, that ferment, that discussion, that debate around finance, and how we integrate that into SDG implementation. And 3, the SDGs under review. Now, the SDGs, as we know, are interlinked. They're indivisible. So we don't pick favorites. They're like family members. We never say we prefer one over another. But looking at poverty, an overarching challenge, climate change, existential threat, food security, and underpinning this SDG 16, which is connected so closely to the implementation of the other targets and goals through institutions, to the basic condition for sustainable development being peace, through the rule of law. So these 4 SDGs plus the finance SDG 17, the partnership, really, really critical, and all the more so at this moment. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Friedrich, for this brief overview. I will come back to you, but before doing so, I would like to ask Lynn Wagner from IISD about providing us some insights and updates on the SDGs under review this year. Lynn, we all heard that SDG 15 is not under review today, but which are and what should we have in mind?
Right, thank you. And as the previous speakers have mentioned, it's Goal 1, ending poverty in all its forms everywhere. Goal 2, ending hunger, achieving food security. Goal 13, taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Goal 16, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions. And then Goal 17, which is reviewed every year, which is on the global partnership. And these goals are interconnected in many ways, and different ways than they've been discussed in other configurations of goals. The Secretary General's SDG Progress Report identifies many challenges that must be addressed with regard to these SDGs, including 23 million more people are living in extreme poverty, and 123 million more are suffering from hunger in 2022 compared to 2019. There's a widening gap in per capita income growth between the poorest and richest countries. The reports from the preparatory meetings, so the regional commissions, revealed that the discussions that are coming into HLPF looked at these goals as in their interlinked perspective. So, for example, the regional preparations for HLPF emphasize that trends in acute food security are the result of multiple compounding drivers, including conflict and insecurity, SDG 16, the environmental and climate crisis, SDG 13, as well as the one we're not discussing, SDG 15, as well as other SDGs are impacting what's going on. So economic upheaval, SDG 8, and the public health crisis, SDG 13. And in addition, the regions highlighted that climate change is rewriting the global resource map for assets such as water, arable land, and energy, while driving migration, displacement, and instability. So while this, as Fred said, these goals are interconnected and indivisible. So we'll be focusing on these important 5 goals, but all these other issues will need to come into play. And I just wanted to close with maybe a hopeful note that although there are many challenges that we cannot ignore, the Secretary General's annual SDG progress report highlights that there has been some progress. Although it's not directly on the SDGs under review, but the report demonstrates there's some progress on health, such as reducing the global infant mortality rate and the incidence of HIV infections. The cost of remittances has been reduced, and there's increasing access to water, sanitation, energy, and mobile broadband. So one of our challenges is to think about how can we use these areas, these pockets of progress, to accelerate progress in all of the other sectors.
Thank you, Lynn, to leaving us with a positive note this morning. And going from that positive note, I would like to address Florence, who, like I mentioned already, is co-chairing the coalition of the UN We Need and also the SDG Kenya Forum. And Florence, it is good to see you. Good afternoon to you. Since civil society has been playing a vital role for the SDGs, I would like to know that you could tell us a little bit more about the role and the perspectives that you are seeing that civil society are looking ahead on the HLPF. And you are, of course, an experienced person because you have also worked in Kenya on the preparatory process, on regional discussions, and on VNRs at the national level and also at the regional. So please tell us a little bit more how you are perceiving from the civil society sector this HLPF, this upcoming HLPF, and also the connection to the Summit of the Future. The floor is yours, Florence, and good to see you again.
Thank you very much, Philip, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to colleagues on the call. And thank you, Ndessa, for this invitation and great conversations, and also looping in civil society organizations, especially from the Global South, to bring their voices in terms of the high-level political forum. And so has to speak about the role of civil society, which all of you are aware that it's very, very important, and to ensure that the governments that lead the process do not only just report by themselves, but also civil society organizations have a space and also voice for the marginalized groups, and also we are not leaving anybody behind at country level. And so, of course, the HLPF presents an opportunity for civil society organizations to hold governments and development partners to account, and to ensure that we remain true to their commitments, and also actions, especially on upholding human rights, ending hunger, poverty, gender equality, and climate action. And so this is very, very important to ensure that the reports that are brought forward at the high-level political forum are not just very rosy, but they can showcase the realities in our countries. Again, given that during HLPF, governments report on the progress, it's important that non-state actors can have the time to scrutinize their country reports, and also to ensure that these reports reflect realities on the ground and inclusivity of the voices of the people. And so this is something that civil society organizations are called to do, to ensure that when our governments are coming forward to report, we are able to scrutinize, we are able to do our shadow reports, or also submit our reports to the governments. For example, Kenya is presenting the third VNR report this year, 2024, and civil society organizations in Kenya, we've come together to come up with a civil society report. We opened up to as many civil society organizations that are available and are willing to report. And of course, we will continue to have challenges where civil society organizations sometimes there's issues of capacity, but also a lot going on, and internal issues that sometimes hinder progressive reporting among civil society organizations. So then how do we ensure that apart from just the development partners and government sometimes who have the capacity, how do we build capacity for civil society organizations to showcase the good work they engage in, and also bring the community voices to play? Something else is HLPF is a unique space for advocacy and global, regional, national making influencing. And so how do we ensure that civil society organizations from very local perspective can utilize or can take advantage of the unique space that the high-level political forum brings to all of us? And so those that are able to be there physically, you can attest to a lot of the advocacy, and also the unique opportunities to interact amongst ourselves, and also to meet colleagues from different nationalities, continents. And so this really provides for us an opportunity, and it's something that we need to continuously find ways of utilizing the high-level political forum space to ensure that a lot of us civil society organizations can grow in terms of the mandate they have at country level, but also link it to the regional and global spaces. Civil society, as you all know, advocates for inclusion of marginalized voices and push for more ambitious targets and action. We've seen this in many African countries where some of the indicators, the SDG indicators, sometimes or targets are not the priority for the national governments, and there've been conversations how national governments can now prioritize also on indicators and targets that civil society organizations have been working on traditionally and that have not been part of the national processes. And so it's good to have this collaboration where civil society organizations are coming forth and showcasing what is it that we need to be focusing on at country level, the priorities, and ensuring that these targets are more ambitious and they can focus on marginalized voices. The media coverage and public engagement during HLPF amplifies key messages and priorities, and it's good to ensure that a lot of civil society organizations can come out and also share and also listen in those who are not able to be there physically, but more importantly, to share what is it they've been able to do, what are their reports, the key highlights from their reports, and what issues are happening within their countries, and how, more importantly, how can we have global solidarity on some of the issues that are happening at very local level. Of course, again, this is an opportunity to push for some of the emerging issues at global, in the global and regional levels. There are challenges that we all know, issues of climate change, like the floodings and the droughts that are happening in very many parts of the world, especially in the global south, conflicts, economic crises that are happening in countries like Kenya, where I'm coming from. How then do we ensure that we can utilize the high-level political forum, we can showcase what is it that is happening, and how can we come up with global solidarity, but also local solutions driven by the people. And so the high-level political forum, I would conclude by saying that it's a very, very unique opportunity that we need to utilize to build synergies, partnerships, collaborations, networks, and ensure that we have information sharing, peer-to-peer learning, joint advocacy, and initiatives, not only from the civil society, but from all different stakeholders. A multi-stakeholder approach is required for us as civil society organizations to advance our work, but more importantly, to utilize this high-level political forum space and to build our networks and to showcase how the world can be progressive in ongoing advocacy efforts at country level and at regional level. So maybe I'll stop there because I know I will have a chance to come back later. Thank you.
Yes, you do indeed, Florence, and thank you for this information. Before I will take it to the next question, Florence, we have several questions about all the activities that you have just mentioned that civil society will be organizing, and to come out and actually share their voice. And therefore, I would be grateful if you could share in the chat all the information that you have about site events, about congregations of civil society and other during the HLPF, both in person and virtual, because I'm seeing a lot of people asking for this kind of information. And those colleagues that are online as well and have more information about the official program, I would be grateful if you could share it in the chat. Simply to let you know, we will have now, after this round of questions, a Q&A. I'm already seeing several in the chat, but we'll also encourage you to raise your hand or put your comment or question in the chat so that we can address it in the time that we have. I would like to move forward to the future of the VNRs, and seeing that many countries have reported at least once already, many of them already twice. And the main question we are asking is about how can it be improved, the process and the quality as well from the VNRs, and what can we expect when we move forward in the next years of the implementation role for the VNRs, having in mind that we still have 5 reviews until we get to 2030 after this year. So it will be very important to see the experiences from the different countries. I'm having problems to connecting to Vice Minister Navarro. I would like to see if he is online, or if not, I would like to take the questions to our floor, to Friedrich Lin, and of course Florence, about the VNRs and where you are seeing actually where they can be improved and what can we expect from them in the near future, since we're going into the second, third, and sometimes 4th generations of VNRs. Friedrich, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philip. And just to say a big thank you, I should say at the beginning, to IISD for organizing this, and also for keeping the HLPF in the forefront and helping us to disseminate the information and engage in the advocacy that Florence mentioned, which is really a huge part of the HLPF. And I'm very grateful to her for making those points. On the VNRs, I think, as you've mentioned, we're now well into the 3rd, and in some cases even 4th reviews We see some real strengths. I think, as Florence mentioned, we have sometimes there's some rosy tinted pictures, and this is, in the discussion here as well. How do we move from description setting the stage, institutions, policies, towards evaluating what works and what doesn't, to fulfill the mandate of the VNRs, to really share lessons learned that can be replicated by others, and to give a really realistic look at progress, so that when we match up the thematic reviews of the SDGs, which we mentioned in the first week, with the VNRs, and say, okay, there's a global review of progress which looks bad, and then we move into the second week and we have 37 countries, and the individual review of progress somehow is a little rosier than the global picture. Sometimes those don't mesh up. So one is good data, a huge investment in data. Countries have done an enormous amount of work on indicators. Sometimes it's making good use of that, moving that from the statistics office into the main line, joining up government and reporting on that. It's about being inclusive, as was mentioned by Ambassador Narvaez, really bringing groups that are not normally part of these review processes of government policy making into the process. And countries some have been extremely successful at that, but of course, more can be done. And one more point would be, if we're looking at transformation, last year's Global Sustainable Development Report looked at how we can initiate transformation. We know that to reach the SDGs, there needs to be real transformation. Transformation is difficult. We face incumbent policy making, the old way of doing things, the business as usual, but we should be beginning to see in some VNRs what countries are doing. Have they experimented? What has worked, whether it's in social security, whether it's in some of the health systems, whether it's energy. There are things happening, there is change. What lessons can we draw from the VNR? So beginning to see the kind of transformation that's happening. But I would say very important, inclusive processes, evidence-based processes, and also looking back. So if we're on VNR number 2, we should be looking back at what's happened since 1 and, if we're on VNR number 3, what's happened since 1 and 2. We've set the stage, we've reported, now it's time to evaluate and assess what went right, what went wrong, and also, I think, keep using the HLPF for what it is. We're very encouraged that we have such a large number of countries stepping forward, and I think it's very important that all countries make use of that we're moving towards universal VNRs. We have maybe 4 or 5 countries that haven't yet conducted a VNR, but it's very important that it's developing, and that we also use the HLPF as a platform to share lessons learned, that when countries go to the enormous effort of preparing an inclusive evidence-based VNR, that evidence, those lessons learned are taken up by others. Thank you.
Good point on the lessons learned, since we have heard today that we already had 367 VNRs presented at the HLPF. There is a lot of brain trust coming together of where we can pick from and actually move forward. And Lynn, I would like to address the question to Florence as well, because I have a follow-up question for you in order to connect it. So give me a minute to give you the floor. Florence, you just heard about the huge investment in data that Friedrich just mentioned, to be more transparent and also inclusive and working on lessons learned. What's your take on VNRs? We have here several people that are leading the communities of practice on VNRs at the regional level. So what can we transmit to them for the near future, since we have already a lot of countries signing up for next year's VNR, and we of course need to make the best out of this year, and bring us some lessons learned and future actions that you think we can do to improve the VNR process.
Thank you very much, Philip. That's a very, very good question. And I always like also the other question about, so what after the VNR? I think these are some of the questions that don't get a lot of audience, and yet very, very critical to ensure that we don't just mobilize towards compiling a VNR. And then after the VNR, then there are no conversations around that. So just to pick up from the conversation is to say that, yes, there's a lot of capacity building, especially that needs to happen at country level. A lot of countries are still grappling with the VNR process itself. It's very, very intense, and ensuring that we could capture maybe all the progress that is being done within countries, but also the inclusivity of bringing stakeholders together, including civil society, private sector, other non-state actors, has always been a challenge for many, many governments and many stakeholders. Many countries are yet to figure out the best way to ensure that all different stakeholders can come, towards the process, and they can formulate either some responses, some report, or they can showcase what is it they've been doing. Sometimes, of course, when processes start at country level very late, we find that stakeholders are not able to sort of follow through the process on time. Again, the issues of capacity, when stakeholders from different, who are not maybe government and sometimes even civil society, the issues of resourcing, bringing together all the civil society organizations to follow up in these processes is very, very costly and many times not budgeted for. And so you find that a lot of stakeholders are not involved in these processes. So then how do we figure out better ways of ensuring that as many stakeholders can be involved and their voices harnessed? And then, of course, there is always sometimes a conflict of interest at national level, and the issues that have been ongoing between civil society organizations especially and other stakeholders has always been a big challenge. Then how do we mitigate some of those? But more importantly, there are things, for example, like on data and research that we can, and statistics that we can handle as countries, whereby how then do we ensure that there's prioritization in terms of maybe budget allocation for research, for data, and ensuring that statistical priorities are well within countries, especially the global south, to be able to measure the indicators and progress that is being done at country level, because sometimes this data is very outdated. Some of the countries do not have adequate resources for these data processes, and you find that these processes are not very well done because just ideally because the national statistical systems are not maybe very well equipped for these processes. So then how do we strengthen our statistical systems to ensure that we can have that? And then also the stakeholder engagement, ensuring that as many stakeholders can come on board, they have prior knowledge what the VNRs are. Some countries come very last minute to tell stakeholders to come together for VNRs, and many stakeholders do not understand the process, and so they're not adequately prepared, or they're not able to ensure that they can process whatever is happening. And then also the issues of political commitment by different governments. I know the statistics in terms of some governments have reported a few times, some do not have the political goodwill. So then how do we continuously ensure that the different governments can have consensus building, but also can prioritize on this very, very important exercise? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florence, for your comments. Very useful. And for all colleagues that were asking for the official program, just to let you know, Friedrich, Marianne, and others have been sharing information in the chat for all of you. Lynn, I was mentioning that I wanted to address you with a follow-up question. Of course, VNRs are important, and please address that too. But I wanted to ask you about the synergies, about SDGs and climate. We are seeing that this is one of the specific spotlights during this year's HLPF. And of course, going and being here in Colombia, a host of the COP16 on biodiversity, next year COP30 in Brazil, we are very eager to see how we can actually have that synergies between SDGs and the climate agenda. So give us a take. What can we expect and how can we actually move momentum forward? Because my next question to the panelists will be on the Summit of the Future and giving the floor to our audience. So help us to linking it up and to moving this process with more momentum. What should we do, Lynn?
Yes. Well, and I think that this question goes to the importance of the HLPF, that the HLPF is the space to have these discussions about synergies and interconnections between these global challenges that we're facing. The SDG and Climate Synergies series of meetings and reports has evolved in the last few years, thinking about being sure that there is an ongoing discussion about synergies, and that really the HLPF is an excellent one of the only venues really to have these discussions. So there's going to be a special event during HLPF. There are a number of special events, and there's going to be a report on climate and SDG synergies. It's a collaboration with over 100 multi-stakeholder experts convened by DESA and the UNFCCC Secretariat. And this report is going to has identified 4 key entry points for addressing these synergies, these issues in synergy. So looking at policy frameworks, knowledge and data, picking that up. Policy frameworks are the VNRs, what are governments agreeing to do. A proposed new financial system, I think carrying over from the SDG summit, and then also cities. And I think that gets to the point of, think global, but act local. How can we really dig in cities? You can see the interconnections and make progress. And so, what can you do in your own community to help bring these synergies? And so then this report will be launched during HLPF. In September, the 5th Global Conference on Climate and SDG Synergies will be meeting in Brazil, on the margins of the G20. So part of the important process here is keeping this conversation going and getting into all these other venues and places where the conversations are narratives are forming. So Brazil's hosting this as host of the G20, bringing this idea, the concepts and the synergies into those conversations. And then, as you mentioned, soon after in October, November, and December, each of the Rio conventions will be having their COP. CBD first in Colombia, then UNFCCC in Azerbaijan, and then UNCCD in Saudi Arabia, and bringing global attention. But so it's really meetings like HLPF where the mandate is to discuss these cross linkages and intersections to help prime the discussions in these other venues for how we can address the challenges that we face holistically. And also, I think the HLPF is an important place to bring in different voices, including different ministries, to the discussion for each of these issues.
Thank you, Lynn, and the invitation to you and the colleagues of IISD. My hometown, Colombia, is hosting the COP16 on biodiversity, so hopefully we can host a webinar live and direct from COP16 and hopefully contribute with our colleagues in Brazil to creating the synergies that you have just mentioned. Since time is running out and we want to look into the future, we want to, of course, see the link with the HLPF and specifically the Summit of the Future. If each of you could give me 1 minute of your main objectives in seeing this synergy happening, where should we concentrate, Florence, between the HLPF and the Summit of the Future? What can we do to trigger the process, to support it, and to foster it as well? Florence, you have been in this process since you are also co-sharing the civil society work on the Summit of the Future. So please, over to you. What's your take from HLPF to the Summit of the Future?
Thank you very much, Philip. And yes, it's good to connect the high-level political forum to the Summit of the Future. And so it's, as you all know, we had the Civil Society Conference here in Nairobi on the 9th and 10th May 2024. And this gave a very great opportunity to civil society voices to air their concerns, priorities, recommendations that could inform the agenda and discussions of the Summit of the Future. And so C4UN and many other partners have been always in the forefront of this particular conversation and discussion. And so one of the things that we are grateful for is that during this conference, we had facilitators of the Pact of the Future, the Global Digital Compact, the Declaration of the Future Generations were present to listen to the civil society voices and their priorities. So there's already, of course, momentum, and there's already, of course, priorities that came from this particular conference. But also one of the key outcomes was the impact coalitions. And so these are self-organized civil society-led groups that have identified mechanisms to ensure that the outcomes of the Summit of the Future can be effectively implemented after September during the Summit of the Future. So we have 20 impact coalitions, and I would want to say to all of us here, it's good for us to plug in and to ensure that we are very aware in terms of what's happening. And these 20 impact coalitions, of course, they provide for us different opportunities and voices to ensure that, of course, this is not a duplication of the existing mechanisms, but it's to ensure that some of the issues that we want to bring forth during the Summit of the Future, we can have priorities, we can showcase that there's, of course, a joint voice in terms of civil society negotiations from the global south, global north, and ensuring that these relevant voices can, of course, be linked up to the relevant authorities and for us to do the follow-up mechanisms. And so I will be sharing one of the events on the chat that is coming up, planned by C4UN for those who will be at New York for the high-level political forum on the 17th of July. Kindly, if you can join us, we'll be happy to continue with these conversations. But also, more importantly, I think it will be important for us to link as many civil society organizations to the Impact Coalition leads, and for them to plug in and be able to monitor the conversations, contribute to the conversations, but also for us to have a united front ahead of September. It's very important when the governments are meeting for the civil society organizations to already figure out what is it that we are bringing forward, but then how do we do so? And so this is the important conversation. Let's all plug in as much as possible in the different opportunities. There are many meetings being organized by different groups, and then make sure that we can also, at country level, do the advocacy within our governments and other partners that are already within these processes. So I'll stop there and I'll be able to share that. Thank you very much.
Oh, I thank you. And Friedrich, I'm also getting many questions that I'm dropping in for when I'm addressing you and the colleagues. Same thing, the connections from HLPF to the Summit of the Future. And I would like to have a bonus question for you because I have it in the chat, which is the ministerial declaration for the HLPF. When can we expect it? I think it's a tough question, but maybe you can give us some hints and if it will connect also to the Summit of the Future. Over to you.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you. And thank you for the bonus question. On the Summit of the Future and the link, I mean, as we know, the Summit of the Future, really a very broad agenda, setting some of the system changes that we need to deliver on the SDGs, but also to rebuild trust in multilateralism. So much broader. But for the HLPF, I would say make use of this space, this platform for multi-stakeholder engagement, for the interest of a broad set of stakeholders, for a real focus on the SDGs to help us identify priorities that can influence and keep the momentum for the SDGs as governments look at these framing conditions, as they set the stage going forward 10, 15, 20 years, as they make those adjustments, that they keep in mind the SDGs, their priorities, so that the HLPF is a chance not only for governments, but for other stakeholders to really put those priorities front and center. Secondly, to look at transition and acceleration. So looking at the SDGs, what kind of changes can we make to accelerate, to find real transformation? There's that interlinkage, the broad discussion, the systemic understanding that Lynn referred to. And even though we have these 5 goals under review, those are in-depth review. The HLPF is also looking at the interlinkages at the other goals. Very, very important that we don't regress back into silos. And the HLPF is a way, when we think of the discussion going to the Summit of the Future, to keep that in mind. And underneath that, I would say the issue of partnerships, cooperation, and finance. We started that discussion last year, really opening it up at the Financing for Development Forum. It was really taken up at the summit. It's continuing through the HLPF. It will continue to the Summit of the Future. Can the HLPF give a step forward to this ongoing discussion of reframing the international financial architecture, dealing with debt, and so forth? On the bonus question, the ministerial declaration today, the negotiations are meeting today. They're very, very close. I think the aim will be to issue a document this week, early in the next few days, a draft for member states' final consideration. Certainly by the time we kick off next week, the expectation is we'll have a draft which will be agreed and will be adopted then on the 15th, and again on the, beg your pardon, on the 17th at the HLPF, and on the 18th by the Economic and Social Council. So today or tomorrow, a draft should be out. Keep an eye on our website. We'll post it as soon as we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, where's that bonus question? Now we have more information about it. Thank you, Friedrich, for that information. And Lynn, we have come to an end, but I wanted to close with your remarks before saying to our audience, thank you to IISD, of course, as well as a partner, and from Cepei, also a big thank you for our audience and those that have been behind in making this possible, of course, our panelists and all of our colleagues behind the scenes. Lynn, the floor is yours from Bogota, Colombia. It's a big thank you and gracias for doing this with us again. And to our audience, thanks for sticking with us. I hope this has been an interesting morning session for you. Please.
Yes, and thank you, Cepei. We really enjoyed doing this, and also to Dessa, to Frederick for joining us, and Florence for sharing your wisdom, and everyone in the chat. The wealth of information and energy is really evident in the chat. And I think that it really bodes well for going into the HLPF. And the momentum into the Summit of the Future. I think just in terms of thinking about the relationship, it was described to me once as the SDGs are the what, and the Summit of the Future is the how. And so look to the Summit of the Future for some of the how. What are some of the tools? One of the things ISD is looking at is the beyond GDP measurements. How do you come up with a measure of comprehensive wealth that would complement just GDP, which is only focusing on the economic activity, and use that to really build in information about natural capital and social capital into decision makers' perspectives of what they should be doing, what's going well, what's not going well. But so finding those hooks and those tools and those ways to really bring together the SDGs in decision making at all levels. So thank you. Really looking forward to seeing many of you next week in New York, and to continue this conversation.
Thank you, Lynn, and a good day for everyone. Ciao. Bye-bye. Adiós y
Thank you
gracias.
and bye.
Goodbye and thank you.